Last lesson in Unit SP or 9 is on two-way tables and relative frequency. I actually really enjoy this one. It does tend to throw some of you guys off because it is a lot of information that we're looking at. So two-way tables. A two-way table is used to show two or more sets of data about the same group, same category, same items. I'm just going to call it the same group. The data relates to one or more different categories or qualities. So relative frequency is going to be a ratio, so that fraction, and we are going to change them to percents. So ratio of the number of times the wanted outcome occurs compared to the total. So written as a ratio, we would write it as wanted outcomes occurred on top, total on bottom. And then we want to change it to a percent. So here are our steps for this. And this is important that we listen. It says step number 1, the item listed first will be our total. And it is the only column or row that we are going to use. It's the only column or row that you want to look at. What is listed second is the wanted outcome, and it goes on top. All right, so this is what a two-way table will look like. So in this one, for instance, we're comparing way more than two. We're comparing 7th graders, 8th graders, and 9th graders, and we're looking at math, science, language arts, and history. So you're going to have to be able to fill out a two-way table. So some of you will struggle with just this. You have to use like elimination. As I look at this, I can figure out my math for 9th grade. That's the only thing that's missing there. So it tells me the total students. So it says fill in the table and list the most popular core subject per grade. So as we're looking at our core subjects for math, I know that 157 students total liked that. Well, out of those 157, 64 came from 8th grade, 42 came from 7th grade. How many does that leave in 9th grade? So I'm going to take 157 and subtract out this number right here, leaving me with 51. So that tells me that there were 51 9th graders that liked math. So now I can look. I don't have enough information here. I don't have enough information here or here or here, but I do have enough information right here. Because in 9th grade, the total number of 9th graders was 200. Out of those 200, 37 of them picked history, 60 picked science, and 51 picked math. What does that leave you with language arts? So I would take 200 minus 37 minus 60 minus 51. That's going to leave me with 52 people here. Now I can use my language arts. I can add all three of these together to get the total number of students in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade who chose language arts. So I add all those together. Whoops, that was timesing. So we have 55 plus 41 plus 52, and that's going to give us 148. Now I can fill out this total here because I know the total number of students that were asked were 584. So I'm going to subtract this, and this to get my final number there. So 584 minus language arts, minus my science, minus my math totals. And hopefully we get the same, which is 128. From here, we can figure out history. So in history, there were 128 students who picked history. 37 of those were from 9th grade. 48 were from 7th grade. How many does that leave for 8th grade? So we'll take 128 and subtract out the number that has been already used for our 7th and 9th grade. And we will get 43. So now I know that there are 43 students in 8th grade who picked history. Now I'm going to go this way and fill it in. I know that there are 200 total students in 8th grade. So I'm going to subtract out and figure out how many were left that pick science. So I'm going to subtract the 43 for history, the 41 for language arts, and the 64 for math. That left me with 52 here. Now I'm going to solve this way. 151 total students picked science. We're going to subtract out the 60 and the 52 to figure out how many were in 7th grade. So 151 minus the 60 minus the 52, leaving me with 39. Now from here, I can add all of these together to get that total. So I would add the 42, 39, 55, 48, and my total would be 184. So there's multiple things we can look at. We can look at math, science, language, arts, history. We can look at total number of students. We can look at which classes were higher. So when we look at 7th grade and 7th grade only, the most popular class for 7th grade was language arts. The most popular class for 8th grade was math, of course. And the most popular one for 9th grade was science. So that's one thing that you can look at on a two-way table. But we could then go look at different areas, and that's what these next things are going to do. And that's why I'm going to come back to these notes. So the first item listed is the total. So this says of the 7th graders. This is the first thing that's listed, which means that is my total. So my total 7th graders are 184. That goes on bottom. And then it says, what is the relative frequency of those who prefer history? So this is where the only thing we're going to look at, because it says the item listed first is the total, goes on the bottom, and the only column or row that we're going to use. So I am only going to look, I'm going to highlight, I am only looking at this one right here, because that is only 7th grader. So that's the only one that I'm going to look at is there. So when I look at this, it says, what prefer history? So of those in green, how many of them preferred history? And hopefully you're saying 48. So we would have a ratio of 48 over 184. I don't care if you leave it that way. It'll ask you to put it in simplest form. So this would be, we could predict that every 12 out of 37 students that we ask that are in 7th grade, they would pick history. So this is my second thing that it asked. Okay. And so to change that, you can do it a couple ways. I would tell you to just hit your conversion, capture that, and you'll get 0.324. You're going to take your point and move it 2 decimals to the right. So right now I have 0.324. I'm going to move this 2 places over so I could say 32%. All right, let's look at our next one. And I'm going to keep going back up to those steps there. It says, what is the relative frequency of the students who prefer math? So now we're looking at of the students who prefer math. There's the first thing that are listed. So the only thing I'm looking at now is that, darn it, is that column right there. I am only looking at my math column. I don't care what grade they're in. I'm only looking at that column right there. So this says, all right, in math, so 157 is my total. That's going to go on bottom. And then it wants to know, or in 8th grade. So there's the second thing that it's asking. So again, only looking at, I'm going to erase this. So that was 51. Only looking at that. So number of students who prefer math was a total of 157. So that goes on bottom. Out of those 157, again, only looking at this. That's why it says only column or row. That's the only column or row we're going to use. We're in 8th grade, so 64. So this would be 64 over 157. I don't think that simplifies, but we'll double check. No. So then we'll convert it and we'll get 0.407. We move this 2 places to the right. 40%, because this is a 7, it's going to round it up to about 41%. Our last one says, of those who prefer science. So now the only row that I'm looking at is science right here. So this is first. What is the relative frequency that they were in ninth grade? This is second. So my total, which is first, goes on bottom, which is 151. Out of those 151, 60 of them were ninth graders. And I know this one, I don't think it can be simplified either. Yeah. So then we're going to convert it to a decimal form, which is 0.397. 39, oh my, Walker. 397. Move your decimal 2 places to the right. So this would round out to about 40%. All right, so we're going to be using the same thing here. It says Nicole asked 40 eighth grade students if they had a curfew. She then asked if they had a set bedtime for school nights. She didn't ask if they actually followed the bedtime. Fill in the two-way table and use it to answer your questions. So I want you to pause and fill in this two-way table because you're going to do this bottom one right here on your own. But what I want you to do is fill in your two-way table here first and then come back and check, see if you got the same as me. All right, hopefully that's what you got. So if you filled out your two-way table correctly, that's good. Now we're going to be looking at the first thing they listed. So question 4 says, of the 8th graders surveyed, this is my total. So I'm only going to, oh no, I didn't change any of those questions. Oh no, it is. Oh, sorry, I was thinking it was this question again. Because this tells us that they were all 8th graders. So of the 8th graders surveyed, so what was the total number of 8th graders surveyed? Was 40. So in this case, we're going to have to be looking at everything. So my ratio here is 40. What is the relative frequency of students who have a set bedtime? So there's the second thing. So set bedtime, we're only looking at totals here. And in this case, set bedtime was 24. So 24 over 40. I'm going to simplify that. And you should get, good, yeah, 3/5, which is 60%. So 60% of the 8th graders she surveyed have a set bedtime. So now this says, of the 8th graders surveyed, so again, we're looking at the total numbers. So there were 40 total surveyed. This is first. What is the relative frequency that have a curfew? This is second. So again, we're looking at totals for curfew. So totals for curfew were 25. And we'll simplify that to 5/8. And then that would be it comes out as 62.5. So I'm going to round it to 63%. So out of all those, 63% of them have a curfew. 60% have a set bedtime. So now we can start comparing a couple of other things. Now we're going to look at of the students who have no set bedtime. So no set bedtime, this is the first thing that I'm looking at. No set bedtime is right here. So this is all I'm looking at is this no set bedtime. That is 16 total. What is the relative frequency that they have a curfew? That's the second thing. So again, only looking in this column right here, how many of them have a curfew, which is 4. So we would say a fourth, which is 25%. All right, this next one says, of the students who have no curfew. So there's the first thing I'm looking at. And no curfew now, we're looking at this way. So I find that there are 15 total that have no curfew. What is the relative frequency that they have no set bedtime? That's the second thing. So in my no curfew, how many of them have no set bedtime, which is 12? And so we'd have 12/15 simplified to 4/5, which is 80% of them will have, of the kids that don't have a curfew, 80% of them also don't have a set bedtime. All right, so try this last one on your own.